Every year, more mysteries are added to the already long list of events that seem to have no explanation. In the last century, we've seen people go missing without a trace, heinous crimes that go unsolved, and archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that left them baffled. These are just a few examples of some of the strange, unsolved cases that continue to frustrate historians, and many more will remain unsolved forever. Number 10. The Ural Relief Map, also known as the Dashka Stone, is an artifact that some people believe was used during the creation of the world. Hence, it's also known by the name the Map of the Creator, and it's left archaeologists scratching their heads since it was first discovered in 1999. The stone was found by a group of Bashkir State University archaeologists while they were working in the Ural Mountains. It was July of '99 when they made the discovery, and they could hardly believe their eyes when the stone tablet was removed from the soil. It measures 58 inches in height and 42 inches in width, and 6 inches in thickness. It weighs around 1 ton, and when the stone was studied further, the team knew that they had stumbled upon something that had never been seen before. It contained a typographical map of an area of the Ural Mountains called Bashkiria, and seemed to be almost impossibly accurate, down to a scale of 1 to 1.1 kilometers. Researchers have been unable to explain how an ancient civilization was able to create such an accurate map without the use of modern technology. Even more astonishing is the fact that the map was drawn in 3 separate levels, which means that it's 3-dimensional. The first layer was made of either ceramic or cement, the second of diopside glass mixed with silicon, and the third, the thinnest of the 3, is made up of a mixture of porcelain and calcium. The stone has since been dated by Russian experts, and they believe it's about 120 million years old. The next step was to identify the area that the map depicts, and it didn't take long. Quite unbelievably, Bashkiria still looks very similar to the way it did millions of years ago, and experts were able to determine that this was the region in question. This has since been confirmed by experts from several other countries, including China, and they've since identified landmarks that can be seen on the map. These include the Belia, Ufimka, and Sutolka rivers, as well as the Ufa Canyon. All of this has caused historians to rethink how people used to live all those years ago, since they seem to have been far more advanced than previously believed. They somehow managed to map the area as if from above, which should have been impossible, but they somehow completed this task easily. Number 9. Maya artifacts have been discovered over the years and have taught us a lot about how that civilization used to live their daily lives, the religious aspects of their communities, and how they managed to survive. Archaeologists, historians, experts, and scholars have been fascinated by the Maya for a very long time, and thousands of artifacts have been recovered from the time when their civilization flourished. But one remarkable discovery that was made in 2015 is unlike any of the others that have been found. The item is a T-shaped jade pendant that would likely have been worn by a Maya king during religious ceremonies. It also contained inscriptions that, when they were finally translated, told the tale of the life of that very king. It measures about 7.5 inches wide, 4.1 high, and 0.3 thick, making it the second largest piece of Maya jade ever uncovered in Belize. But what makes it unique is the fact that it contains these 3 historical inscriptions, as well as the area where it was found. Since the jade pendant is so large, experts would have expected it to have been found in one of the known ancient Maya cities, but that was not the case. It was found in Nimli Punit, which at the time that the pendant would have been worn, was an isolated area where few people lived. Similar smaller pieces have been found, but they contained no inscriptions, and they were discovered in far more populated areas. Nimli Punit is situated close to the edge of the Maya zone, and it's estimated that it was inhabited by the Maya between 150 and 850 CE. The site had been lost for a long time until it was rediscovered in the 1970s, and since then, archaeologists have unearthed several important artifacts from the area that have been studied extensively. It's also known that a palace was built at the site sometime around 400 CE, since the pendant was found among its buried remains. When the palace was excavated, a tomb was discovered, and inside, researchers were shocked to come across the remarkable artifact. It's believed that the tomb dates back to around 800 CE, and several other items, such as pottery and a large stone in the shape of a deity, were found in the same area around it, to the delight of the archaeologists involved. The shape of the pendant represents wind and breath, so it's assumed that it was worn by the king during ceremonies in honor of the Maya god of wind, Hurricane. Historians believe that these ceremonies were held to hasten the arrival of monsoon rains in the area each year, since it was needed to keep their crops alive. What's perplexed researchers is the fact that the king to whom the pendant belonged was not found in his tomb. Usually, with these types of discoveries, the artifacts that are discovered are buried with their owners, and no explanation has been found for this anomaly. As for why the area was abandoned by its inhabitants, it's been suggested that climate change forced them to relocate since their crops had started failing. Hence, it's possible that the pendant was merely buried on its own in hopes that Hurricane would send more favorable weather. Much of the text on the pendant still needs to be translated, but we now know that it belonged to King Janab ul Kinech. It also speaks of his parents and the fact that the king was somehow connected to the Maya city of Karakol. Further research will hopefully reveal more about the king and his people, but the mystery of why his pendant was inscribed, unlike any other that's been found, remains unsolved. Number 8. When we think of the great Egyptian pyramids, they conjure up images of a time that seems almost inconceivable to us as modern humans. The ancient artifacts that have been found there have taught us a lot about their culture, history, and beliefs. But not many people know that an area in Wales in the UK contains artifacts that are even older than the pyramids. The town in question is called Monmouth, and it's situated in southeast Wales near the country's border with England. The town is well known for its long history, and it's considered one of the top 10 towns in all of the UK as far as archaeology is concerned, since thousands of artifacts have been found there. But the latest and most mysterious of these finds isn't a mere object like pottery or jewelry. The chairman of the Monmouth Archaeology Society, Steve Clark, was leading a team of researchers in the area in June of 2012 when they found the remains of an ancient structure. First, they found 3 massive wooden beams that had been placed next to each other in an area that used to be a lake in ancient times. That lake has since disappeared since it filled in with silt at some point in history. Whoever built the structures likely used these large beams as part of the foundation of a large structure, since they were set deep into the ground. Through the centuries, the wood decayed, and the voids that were left behind then filled with oxygen-free clay. Many questions still remain at the site, though. Experts have only been able to speculate as to what this structure was used for, and the techniques that were used to set these 3 beams into the ground remain unknown. This is because they aren't normal sleeper beams. It's believed that whoever built the structure somehow managed to split whole trees in half before placing them in the ground. This would have been extremely difficult and labor-intensive, but it gets even more impressive. Archaeologists have been unable to determine just how far down the beams were planted, and they have no idea who built the structure or what it was used for. Some theories have been suggested thanks to the placement of the beams, though. They seem to line up perfectly with the middle of an ancient lake that used to be in the area. And so it's been suggested that the structure was used as a causeway that led to a crannog, which are man-made islands that are often found in Scotland and Ireland. If that is indeed the case, the causeway would have been massive, and it would have taken a very long time to build. But this remains speculation, since it remains unknown whether it was constructed before or after the lake existed. Experts have been unable to determine the age of the beams, and further research will have to be conducted before these questions can be answered. For now, it's assumed that the beams date back to the Bronze Age, thanks to other discoveries that were made. These include a mound of burnt rocks and a trough that were found along with the beams. It's believed that the stones were heated in a fire, after which they were thrown into a trough to boil the water, as was often done during that age. Number 7. It's always interesting whenever the experts are unable to explain an ancient artifact, such as a 1,500-year-old pendant that was found beneath the soil in Cyprus in 2011. The site where the amulet was found is called Nea Paphos, and it's not uncommon for archaeologists to find artifacts from long ago in that area. The amulet has caused some confusion since it seems to break with convention as far as historical figures go. Furthermore, it contains inscriptions on both sides. On one side, text was found, and when it was translated, it read as Yahweh, who was a god, is the bearer of the secret name, the Lion of Re, the ancient Egyptian sun god, secure in his shrine. While this may seem unremarkable, scholars soon figured out that this inscription is a palindrome, which means that it can be read normally forwards or backwards with the same result, which, given that it's 59 characters long, is quite impressive. It was already a remarkable discovery, but on the other side of the pendant contained even more surprises that are yet to be explained. It contains several images, including a bandaged mummy on a boat, and is likely meant to represent Osiris, another Egyptian god. The other images are of a man sitting on a stool with his right hand held up to his lips as if to silence someone. This image represents the god of silence, Harpocrates. Next to him is the image of a mythical creature with the head of a dog. These characters have been seen on many other artifacts, and we know that it's called a cynocephalus. What struck researchers as strange is the fact that the cynocephalus is mimicking the action of Harpocrates, which is just one of several inaccuracies that have been found on the artifact. Firstly, the palindrome contains several spelling mistakes. In more than one instance, two text characters, P, are used when a single V would have been correct, and the last three characters, which are EAI, seem to have been added in a hurry since they seem squeezed in on one side of the amulet. Hence, experts believe that the person who created the amulet did not fully understand ancient Egyptian script, and that they made a mistake as far as Egyptian culture was concerned. Normally, Harpocrates would be depicted sitting inside a lotus flower with his legs up, and he was never seen depicted on a stool before. It's also unprecedented to see the cynocephalus mimicking Harpocrates' actions. Under normal circumstances, it would have been shown with its paws held up in adoration of Harpocrates, and historians have been unable to explain why the amulet was created this way. And then there's the fact that whoever created the piece decided to add crisscrossing lines across the bodies of both figures. Whenever this was done, it meant that those figures would be mummified along Osiris, which would not have been possible in this case. It's also noted that the cynocephalus is often depicted with bandages, but in this case of the amulet, it's Harpocrates who dons them. This was never done before, and it remains unknown whether these were innocent errors or whether these factors were intentionally included. It's been suggested this was done as an act of rebellion against the rulers of that time, or that the amulet was made cheaply by someone who didn't understand the culture at the time, but these theories remain to be proven. Number 6. A mystery started in 1954 when a man arrived at an airport in Tokyo, Japan, with a passport that no one recognized. To this day, no one has been able to figure out who he was or where the country that he came from was located. According to reports, it was a very hot day in Tokyo when a man named John Zegras got off a plane at Haneda Airport, and on first appearances he seemed like any other passenger who'd flown into the city that day. He was dressed in a suit, and the most remarkable thing about him was that he had a beard. That is, until he handed his passport to a customs officer, who immediately became suspicious. The passport didn't seem like a fake, but he'd never heard of the country where the man had traveled from, Taured. He summoned immigration officers who immediately started questioning the man, and he seemed to take exception to this. He insisted that Taured really did exist, and that it had been a recognized country for over 1,000 years. Baffled by these developments, they showed the man a map of the world and asked him to point to Taured. He pointed to an area between France and Spain, and the officials tried to explain that this region was called Andorra, but he insisted that was a mistake. He'd never heard of Andorra, and as time went by, he became even more irritated with the delay to his travel plans. He assured the officials he was who he said he was, and reminded them that he had stamps in his passport that proved he had traveled to Japan before. He also produced currency from different European countries and showed them his checkbook, and that did not make things any clearer. His checkbook was issued by a bank that no one had ever heard of, and despite searching for it, no one could find. The man was then asked what business he had in Japan and whether he had anyone whom the airport could contact to verify his claims. He provided them with the name of a company that he was planning on working with, the hotel where he planned on staying, and a bank that he was working with. The man in question couldn't be tracked down, and the bank he claimed to be working with also didn't exist. The company that he mentioned did indeed exist, but they'd never heard of a man named John Zegras. The officers had no choice but to detain him, and he was put into a nearby hotel while they investigated his claims. To ensure that he didn't flee, 2 police officers were posted outside his hotel door, and it was expected that he would be brought back to the airport for further questioning the next day. But to everyone's surprise, when the officers opened the door to check on him, the man was gone. They insisted that the room's door had been shut all night, and since it was on an upper floor of the hotel, there was no way he could have jumped from the balcony to escape. He had taken all of his belongings with him, and no one ever saw him again. Number 5. La Côte à la Chèvre is a mysterious cave on the island of Jersey in the English Channel. It's fascinated experts for decades, since it was discovered that Neanderthals used to return to the cave every year, and no one knows why. While it was known that Neanderthals used to live in this cave, it's recently been determined that they started utilizing the space much earlier than initially believed. Artifacts that have been recovered from the site showed that they may have started living there about 250,000 years ago. Remarkably, they would return to the cave over and over again, and this tradition was followed by generation after generation. They would hunt animals in the area and seemed to have taken a liking to the caves, unless there was another, as yet unknown reason for their returning there. Stone tools that have been found in and around the cave give researchers a good idea of how they moved through the area. Many of their hunting spots would have been flooded over the English Channel. But other areas remain accessible, and it's hoped that they will provide historians with more information on the people who lived there all those years ago. The area would have been much larger than it is today, since the ice caps were still intact, and the area had not been flooded by the ocean yet. This suggests that wildlife was abundant in the region, and that the caves would have made for perfect shelter while the Neanderthals were living there. In an effort to learn more about them, experts would now examine the 16,000 artifacts, which include animal bones, sediment, and stone tools that were collected in the area, and they might provide further insight into Jersey's ice age. The only theories that have been put forward so far are that the caves might have been visible from a long way away, and that Neanderthals would have immediately recognized the caves as shelter. It's also been suggested that the location of the cave was shared among them, and that this knowledge was passed along from generation to generation. That would explain why they returned to the caves for decades, but these theories remain to be proven. This is not the only cave in Jersey that's known to have been inhabited by Neanderthals. It's the La Côte de Saint-Brelade, which is much larger than La Côte à la Chèvre, where archaeologists found 13 Neanderthal teeth on a granite shelf, and it's believed that they belonged to 2 individuals. Since some of the teeth do not contain normal characteristics found in Neanderthal teeth, it's been suggested that a modern human either lived in the cave at some point, or that they were the result of Neanderthal-modern human breeding. Further research is being carried out on the teeth to determine whether this was indeed the case, but for the time being, they're on display at the Jersey Museum and Art Gallery, where they can be viewed by the public. Number 4. The Carisbrooke stone arrangement can be found in Victoria, Australia, and while it's been studied extensively by scholars and archaeologists, no one is certain who constructed it or what its purpose was. It's certain that the arrangement is of Aboriginal origins, and is believed to be thousands of years old, but its exact age has not been determined as of yet, adding even more mystery and intrigue to the already mysterious site. The site, which is located about 2.5 miles from Carisbrooke, was first discovered by Aldo Massola in 1963. Not much was done at the site at the time, but during the 1980s, his notes on the arrangement were studied, and the stone arrangement was finally studied and surveyed. Massola wrote a piece that was submitted to the Victorian Naturalist publication in 1963, and he included a thorough description. He stated that it measured 200 by 17 feet, and that it was roughly shaped like a boomerang. The first survey was conducted by the Victorian Archaeological Survey in the 1980s, after a local landowner brought fresh attention to the strange arrangement. It was assumed that it was an old Aboriginal ceremonial site, but this has not been definitively proven yet. This is because no other records of Aboriginal ceremonies in the area have ever been found, and none of these alleged traditions were passed down to their descendants, or so it would seem. Modern descriptions of the site state that it contains 2 arcs that were constructed out of large stones, and that it also contains several smaller stones as well as a cairn, which might have been used as a trail marker, memorial, or boundary marker. It's believed that the arch shape was intentionally constructed to represent a boomerang, since it would have been an important hunting tool long ago. but some scholars disagree, since the shape has an irregular curve, and the sides run parallel to one another, unlike the usual shape of a boomerang. Then there's the theory that the stone arrangement was intended to be used as an astronomical tool, much like England's Stonehenge is thought to be. Some people believe the arch represents the Milky Way, and that the nearby cairn represents Sirius, or another bright star that could be seen in the sky at the time of its construction. It's also been determined that the ends of the crescent point to the cardinal point on a compass, but it remains unknown whether this was intentional or merely a coincidence, which seems unlikely. Some experts believe the area was used during male initiation ceremonies, since other similar sites that were found in New South Wales were used for this purpose. The site was bought by the Australian government in 1975, and they took over its preservation from the Archaeological Relics Office. It's now been declared an official archaeological area and has since been sold to the Indigenous Land Council and is currently in the care of the Ballarat Aboriginal Co-op. A lot of further study needs to be conducted at the site to determine who created the strange stone arrangement and what it was used for. Number 3. It's remarkable how often throughout history, massive ships carrying tons of important cargo suddenly disappeared without explanation. While most of these ships are eventually found, others are lost to the ocean forever, as is the case with the SS Marine Sulphur Queen. The ship's formal name was SO New Haven. It was a T2 tanker that was constructed in Chester, Pennsylvania in 1944, and it was initially intended to carry oil, as were so many tankers that were built around that time. In 1960, though, the ship sailed to the dry dock at the Bethlehem Steel Company in Sparrows Point, Maryland, where it underwent some changes. It was converted so that it could carry molten sulfur, and its name was then changed to the Marine Sulphur Queen. To give the ship this capability, it was fitted with an independent tank that measured 306 feet by 30 feet by 33 feet. All the original bulkheads were removed to accommodate this change, and the ship's internal structure also had to be modified. Inside the tube were 4 individual chambers, and the main tube sat around 3 feet clear of any surrounding material. The sulfur would be kept at around 155 degrees Fahrenheit thanks to a steam system that was installed, and in 1961 the ship set out on its first journey after its conversion, and the changes worked well, and for 2 years it would make regular trips with molten sulfur as its cargo. But on the 2nd of February, 1963, all of that changed. On that day, it sailed from Beaumont, Texas with over 15,000 tons of sulfur on board. It's known that it was in the water near the Florida Keys 2 days later, since a routine message detailing the vessel's position was received. But by the 6th of February, all communication from the vessel had stopped, and it was listed as missing. It was speculated that it must have gone down in the Straits of Florida, and that area was thoroughly searched, but to no avail. That search continued for 19 days, but no sign of it was found, and the effort had to be called off. The only evidence that the Sulphur Queen had gone down was the discovery of a few life preservers in the water and a few small pieces of debris that were believed to have belonged to the vessel. It was noted that on the 4th of February, the ship would have been sailing through high seas with waves reaching 16 feet and winds reaching around 45 knots. During the resulting investigation, it was determined that the ship would never have set sail that day. Crew that served aboard the vessel regularly had reported fires would routinely break out along the sides of the 4 tanks. This happened so often that the alarm would not even be sounded by officers anymore, since they'd grown used to the fires. During one trip, the ship was on fire when it arrived at its destination, and was still burning when it set sail once again. When the fires were doused with water, the sulfur would cake around important equipment, causing further issues. The Coast Guard also discovered that the ship's keel had been badly corroded over the years, and that it developed a weak back, which meant that the keel was in danger of splitting in two. T2 tankers were notorious for this fault, and hence inspections on these ships were taken very seriously. Many more issues were reported, and the fact that the Sulphur Queen was allowed to set sail that day is almost unthinkable. The wreck of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen has never been found, and its fate, along with that of its crew, remain unknown. Number 2. The disappearance of 3 women, 21-year-old Ann Miller, 19-year-old Patricia Bluff, and 19-year-old Renee Brawl has never been solved. and it remains one of Indiana Dunes State Park's most confounding mysteries. The incident occurred on the 2nd of July 1966, when the three friends decided to spend some time together on the 4th of July weekend. That morning, Anne picked the other two women up in her car, and they traveled to Indiana Dunes State Park. They all hailed from the Chicago area, so it took them about an hour to drive there. They arrived at the beach in question at around 10 a.m., and the area was already packed with people who were in a celebratory mood. For most of the day, they lounged in the sun, went swimming, and spent extra time out in nature. But by the time the sun started to go down, all three of the friends had disappeared. A couple who'd been at the beach reported that they'd seen the three women speaking to an unidentified man at some point before they went missing. He was described as well-tanned, in his early 20s with dark wavy hair, and he was standing on a 16-foot wide boat, which had a blue interior. And after speaking for a while, the three friends boarded the vessel, leaving all their possessions behind on the beach. The man then sailed the boat west and never returned, according to witnesses. A park ranger was tasked with collecting the women's belongings, which included Anne's denim shorts, polo shirt, shoes, white bathing cap, car keys, comb, and thermos. Also left behind were Patricia's robe, sunglasses, transistor radio, her white towel, a wallet, which had $5 inside, and maybe a couple other small things. Renee's belongings included her towel, shorts, blouse, sun hat, cigarettes, suntan lotion, and her wallet, which contained 25 cents and about $55 in checks. Soon enough, the three women were reported as missing by their families, and park rangers would report that Anne's car was found abandoned in the park's car lot, in the same spot where it was seen on the 2nd of July. Inside, they found a few more of the women's belongings, but they offered no clues as to what might have happened to them. On the 5th of July, the first official search was started. Divers scoured the lake, officers and rangers searched on foot, and horses were brought in to cover ground more quickly, but nothing of any use was found. A man who had used his video camera on the beach that day offered his footage to the police, and thanks to this, they were able to identify two possible boats that may have picked the friends up that day. It was tentatively determined that the man in question had dropped them off at the beach after they were seen getting onto his boat, and several witnesses would report that they saw all three women walking along the beach and eating long after they were seen getting aboard. A few people saw another man, who's also not been identified, approach them and then accompany them onto the second boat in the footage, but this sighting has never been confirmed. In the months that followed, evidence was found that Renee was planning on breaking up with her boyfriend since he showed more interest in cars than in her, but her family believes she had changed her mind by the time of her disappearance. Anne's friends revealed that she was 3 months pregnant at the time as well, and that Patricia might also have been pregnant. Both women were in relationships with married men, and one of Patricia's friends speculated that she'd planned her own disappearance. She'd also come home with a facial injury at one point and stated she was having trouble with a horse syndicate while dealing with her thoroughbred. It remains unknown if any of these factors contributed to their disappearances, and this case sadly remains unsolved many decades later. Anyone who has new information on this case should contact the Indiana State Police at 317-899-8577. Number 1. In 1952, the people living in North Yorkshire, England, started reporting sightings of strange and inexplicable lights in the sky, and it's considered one of the area's most prominent UFO mysteries that's never been explained. It all started not with members of the public, but with a group of 10 servicemen and officers from 269 Squadron of the Royal Air Force. A few minutes before 11 on the 19th of September that year, they witnessed something unlike anything they'd seen before, and they had no idea what to make of it. They reported seeing a perfectly saucer-shaped craft while they were on the runway of the RAF Topcliffe military base in North Yorkshire. A meteor jet was making its way to the runway at Dishforth Aerodrome, and it was being followed closely by this craft, which no one could identify. At the time, the RAF was engaged in Project Mainbrace, which consisted of a series of simulations that were carried out over the course of 13 days to determine what would happen in the case of a Soviet or Western European attack that was carried out in the area. One officer stated that he initially only saw a distant white spot in the sky. He estimated that it was traveling at about 15,000 feet and that it was about 5 miles out from the meteor jet. Another officer would state that the object was silver and that it started swaying from side to side as it approached. At first, he believed it was a parachute, but the object didn't seem to hover in place before suddenly darting towards the jet and flying after it. It started rotating on its own axis, but then suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds and flew west before being lost from sight. The entire event lasted just 20 seconds, and everyone who'd seen the craft agreed that they'd never witnessed anything like it before, and it would come to light that this was not the first sighting of a strange object in the sky. On the 13th of September, the crew of a Danish destroyer spotted a triangular object traveling through the night sky. They were taken aback by the speed at which the craft was traveling, around 900 miles per hour, and reported that it emitted a blue light. On the 20th, the day after the second sighting, a newspaper reporter aboard the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt was one of the witnesses who saw a spherical object in the sky. He noticed that it was following the fleet, and while it was initially believed to be a weather balloon, this theory was later dismissed. No aircraft were ever picked up by radar systems, and despite the skies being watched very carefully, no one reported seeing the object. The sightings were thoroughly investigated, but no explanation has ever been found, and it remains an unsolved mystery. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.